Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hareen Contractor with the Washington Leadership Program, and I would like to welcome you all to our inaugural webinar on how to become a delegate to the Democratic National Committee. The WLP, along with the Asian American Hotel Owners Association, AAHOA, would like to see more diverse faces at both the Democratic and Republican National Conventions. We are going to do a second webinar for the Republican National Convention next week, on November 3rd around 7 p.m. So if you would like to tune into that, we also have a web link on our website to get that more information there. But in the meantime, we'd love to have you learn about the DNC process. And we have a special guest, Congressman Ami Bera, who is one of just 14 AAPIs in the Congress, and he's the only Indian American member of Congress. And he knows just as well as anyone why we need to be more involved in the political process and why we need more diverse people at the table. So I'm going to kick it over to him, and so he can introduce why it's important to get involved, and the DNC folks to tell you next steps. So, Congressman, take it away.
Great, thanks, Hareen. Good afternoon to everyone who's joining us around the country for this important webinar. As Hareen said, I'm Congressman Ami Bera, and I represent California's 7th Congressional District. I also want to thank the AAHOA and the WLP program for co-hosting today's webinar, and to the DNC for providing this training to our community. Today's webinar is going to focus on how the Asian American and Pacific Islander community can participate in what is going to be the biggest political event of 2016, the Democratic National Convention. If you look at our community, the political power of our community has nearly doubled within the last decade. And by 2055, the AAPI community will become the largest immigrant community in the nation. With increased political power comes a need to ensure that we are part of every part of the political process at every level of every step. Stumbled over my words there for a second. It's also important for us to have a voice in the process and to have delegates at the Democratic National Convention that reflect the diversity in this community. When we refer to the AAPI community, we're referring to people from nearly 50 countries and ethnic groups, each with distinct cultures, traditions, and histories. We're talking about more than 16 million people living in the United States whose votes have become the margin of victory for prominent elections. Now, as we head toward 2016 and prepare to elect not only the next president of the United States, but other important down-ballot votes, it's critical for our community to become educated, informed, and involved with the process. I commend all of you for taking the time to become engaged and ensure our community is well represented. If you think about the Democratic Party, what's great about the party is it reflects the diversity of the United States of America. We want to make sure that diversity is reflected in the delegates that come out to the convention. I hope you guys have a great training. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Hareen to continue today's program. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We really appreciate your help and blazing the trail for all of us to follow. And that's where it all begins. Congressman Ami Bera got really involved in his community, and that's why he ran for Congress, to try to give back and change the economic face of his home district. And he's done a great job of that. And we really appreciate his leadership, not only in the Sacramento area, but for the larger AAPI community. And so now we're going to give a little shout out to KJ Bakshi, who's the AAPI Engagement Director, for his role in helping set this up. And appreciate the whole DNC staff in their due diligence to try to make sure we have a diverse crowd here at our convention training. And we're just waiting for the trainers to get set up so they can give you some more information. But they're probably just going to give you a little overview on how it is in each one of your states. So each state has their own diverse process, whether you get selected as a delegate from the local level or for the statewide level, and how you choose a candidate to represent yourself at the convention. So as you know, the convention is 9 months away in Philadelphia, and it's an exciting time not only to come together as a community, but to get engaged in one of the oldest and long-standing traditional processes we have. So let's give a little minute for them to set up. But if you have any other questions, feel free to email us. My email is Hareen, Harin, at thewlp.com. That's THEWLP.com. The email for the AAPI Engagement Director is AAPIDems@dnc.org. And one of us will get back to you on additional processes if you need. Again, the Washington Leadership Program at AAHOA are nonpartisan organizations, and we're going to do another one for the RNC here in a week. Again, we want to see diverse faces everywhere. AAHOA is one of the largest industry groups in the country. They represent almost 50% of all hotel and motel owners in the country. And we love our partnership with them. We work closely with all the groups. And so we hope to see more of you all out here. So let's give it a minute or two. The trainers get set up. All right, I see them all now. So I'm going to let them take it away and let them introduce themselves and go on with the process. Thank you all.
Hello, Hareen, and everyone joining us today. Thank you for taking the time to participate in this important training. My name is Patrice Taylor, and I serve as the Director of the Office of Party Affairs and Delegate Selection here at the DNC.
And hi, I'm Courtney Federico, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Office of Party Affairs and Delegate Selection, also at the DNC. And so today, Patrice and I are going to be talking with you about the different ways for you to get involved in the 2016 Democratic National Convention. So before we talk about all the specific ways for you to get involved, Patrice is going to talk about the convention a little bit.
Thank you, Courtney. We are so excited that Philadelphia will be hosting our next convention. And before we talk about the mechanics of the delegate selection process, we wanted to talk to you a little bit about the convention itself. As you may be aware, the convention is scheduled to take place the week of July 25th, 2016 in Philadelphia. That is where party leaders will gather to conduct the business of our party, and that includes nominating the next president of the United States and our party's nominee for that office. And then that is where the convention delegates will actually formalize that selection.
And so participating in the convention as a delegate is one of the many ways that you can be involved. So there are 5 types of delegates. And we will explain how each type is elected and what the function of each is. But first, I'm going to quickly give everyone a rundown of the timeline and where we're at in the cycle and what the timeline is going to look like a few months down the road. So at this point in the cycle, state parties are working on recruiting Democrats to run as delegates. And then starting next month, presidential candidates will begin filing with state parties and secretaries of state across the country. And that's to ensure that they can get on the ballot. And then in February, the early states, that's Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina, will hold their primary or caucus, and the rest of the states will do so from March to June. And then in June and July, the convention standing committees will meet. And then in July, the convention will take place.
Thank you, Courtney. States will use either a primary system or a caucus system to select their delegates. And we're going to talk a little bit right now about the differences between the two. A primary system is when Democrats vote for the candidate of their choice and delegate positions are awarded proportionally based on those results. Primaries are typically those government-run systems where you go in and you vote on the ballot and vote for other offices through a government-run system. A candidate must receive 15% of the vote to be eligible to receive any delegates. We award our delegates proportionally based on the results at both the congressional district level and the statewide level, both in a primary and a caucus system. A caucus system is when delegates are awarded to presidential candidates based on the preferences or the votes taken at a meeting or a caucus or a series of meetings, depending on the caucus process that is in the state. Again, what both processes have in common are that they are open to only Democrats. or those who identify themselves as supporting the Democratic values and participating as a Democrat. And they determine the presidential preference among the state's votes. Understanding which system your system uses to elect their delegates is critical if you're interested in running for a delegate, and that's one of the very first points in the process that you should make yourself aware of.
And so there are two different categories of delegates, two major categories. And so there's unpledged and pledged. And so unpledged delegates do not have to run to be a delegate. They serve by virtue of the office they hold. And so this category is made up of DNC members, Democratic members of Congress, Democratic governors, and distinguished party leaders. Their presidential preference is not reliant on the outcome of the primaries or caucuses that Patrice just talked about. And then there are the pledged delegates. So they must run for their position, and they must file a statement of candidacy and a pledge of support to a presidential candidate. Delegate positions are awarded proportionally to a presidential preference based on the results of the primary or caucus. So for example, if there were two candidates participating in a state's primary election and candidate A received 70% of the vote and candidate B received 30%, then candidate A will be awarded 70% of the state's pledged delegate, and candidate B will be awarded 30% of the state's pledged delegates. So there are three subcategories of pledged delegates, and they are district level delegates, pledged party leader and elected official delegates, which we'll call PLEO delegates, and at-large delegates.
Just to talk a little bit more about these delegate categories, district level delegates are elected at the congressional district level or smaller. They are each state's largest sum of delegates. So as you think about where you want to encourage your supporters and folks in the community that you outreach to participate, it's at the district level because this is the most opportunity that you have. They are the first group of delegates to be elected. They make up, like I said, most of the state's delegation, and any Democrat is eligible to run at the district level. In states that use a primary system, there are three different ways that district level delegates are elected. Those ways are a pre-primary caucus system, and that's when Democrats meet before the actual primary to vote on the delegate candidates, sort of like a pre-primary slating meeting. Following the primary, those delegates are awarded proportionally based on the results of the actual primary. There is also the second system, which is what we call a two-part primary. Voters vote for the presidential and delegate candidates on the same ballot. So you will go into your for your state's primary, you will vote for your presidential candidate of choice, and you will also vote for your delegate candidates of choice. And based on the results of that election, the top vote-getting delegate candidates, are awarded and split between the two sexes. The third and final way in a primary system that delegates are elected are what we call a pre-primary caucus process. And that process is when a state holds their primary, the number of delegates are awarded to each presidential candidate as a result of that contest, and then there are special post-primary systems meetings where those delegates are elected. In caucus states, district level delegates are elected through multiple tiered caucuses, and those tiers and what those steps are vary from state to state. But an example of that could be a precinct caucus to a county caucus to the state convention, if you could be elected in that system. And also in a caucus process, delegates are allocated to presidential candidates based on the proportional share of support for each candidate among the Democrats participating in that caucus.
Great. Thanks, Patrice. So that is district level delegates. And so now we're going to move on to the pledged party leader and elected official or PLEO delegates. And so this is a subcategory of the pledged delegates that we talked about earlier. And they're considered in priority order of elected officials. So that's big city mayors and statewide elected officials, and then state legislative leaders, state legislators, and other state, county, and local elected officials and party leaders. So PLEO delegates are allocated to presidential candidates based on statewide results, so either the primary or the caucus, and they're selected by the state convention participants or a quorum of district level delegates or the state party committee.
The final category of pledged delegates are what we call at-large. They are elected after the PLEO delegates, and they are used, if necessary, to achieve equal division amongst the delegation and gender diversity, as well as other constituency.
I think we're having some technical difficulties. I think we're going to try to see if we can get them back on in a minute here, but I think so far the information they've given us has been very useful, especially at the local level and the PLEO delegates. I know some of you will have to get more information on the national delegate side because that's what you might be participating in. So hopefully they'll be coming up soon, just waiting to hear back. All right, I think they're almost up. Hopefully this has all been very helpful. I'm going to cut off now.
Okay, great. We were talking about at-large delegates before, so we'll start from that part and begin again. Again, the third and final category of pledged delegates are what we call at-large delegates. They are elected after the PLEO delegates and are used, if needed, to achieve equal division between men and women, as well as to achieve the representation goals or the affirmative action goals that are provided for in each state plan. We'll talk a little bit more about that in greater detail as we go through the training. But at-large delegates are allocated to presidential candidates proportionally based on the statewide results, and they are selected by the convention participants, a quorum of the district level delegates, which have already been elected, or the state party committee. This is another piece of information that's specific to each state's delegate selection plan.
All right, thanks, Patrice. And so we just ran through the three kind of subdivisions of pledged delegates, but I'm now going to talk about another way to participate, and that's as an alternate delegate. So alternates may be allocated and elected in one of three ways. So 75% of alternates can be allocated at the district level, and then 25% of those alternates can be allocated at the at-large level, or a state can have all of their alternates at the district level or all of their alternates allocated at the at-large level. So alternate candidates must meet the same filing requirements as district level delegates, and they must also be equally divided between men and women and reflect the state's representation goals or affirmative action goals.
Another component of the party's delegate selection process is what we call candidate right of review. And this is a component that allows presidential campaigns the right to review all of the delegate candidates that have applied to be elected and that are pledged to those particular candidates. For district level delegates, the presidential campaigns must approve, after they've reviewed the list of everyone that's applied, they must approve at least 3 names for every slot. And that is for all of the cases except for what we call a 2-part primary system, where they are allowed to approve 1 name for every slot. For PLEO and at-large delegates, presidential campaigns must approve 1 or 2 names for each position that they are entitled. They just have to tell us, the plan provides that information as to whether or not it will be 1 or 2.
All right, and so now we're going to move on to talk about standing committee members, which is another way to participate in the 2016 Democratic National Convention. And so there are 3 standing committees, and they are the Credentials Committee, the Platform Committee, and the Rules Committee. So the Credentials Committee focuses on the seating of delegates. The Platform Committee develops the party's issue statement, and the Rules Committee manages the convention administration. Standing committee members are elected by the state's delegates. However, they don't need to be delegates to serve on one of the committees. So like delegates, standing committee members must be equally divided between men and women, and they must reflect the state's representation goals. Standing committee members are allocated to presidential campaigns based on the results of the statewide vote, and they are nominated by the presidential campaigns.
So we've so far talked about how to participate in the convention by either going as an elected pledge delegate, an alternate, a standing committee member. There are two other ways that you can participate as a part of your state's delegation. And those final two ways will be as a convention page or the delegation chair. So convention pages staff their state's delegation. They are selected by the chair of the state Democratic Party in each state, and those positions must also be equally divided between men and women and reflect the affirmative action goals that are established in each state's delegate selection plan. The delegation chair is one position that's allocated for every state party, and it's the ceremonial leader of his or her state's delegation, and that position is also selected by the state's delegates.
Great. So those are the different ways that you can get involved in the convention. But I did want to talk a little bit about the representation goals that we've been referring to throughout this training. And so each state must set specific numeric goals for African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, Asian American and Pacific Islanders, people with disabilities, LGBT Americans, and youth. And these goals are intended to ensure that the delegation selecting our next nominee is representative of all Americans and that the delegation really embodies the party's fundamental value of inclusion. And so in addition to setting these goals, states conduct proactive outreach efforts, which include education, recruitment, and training. And through these efforts, they will make available a summary of delegate selection process and filing requirements, an explanation of how voters register and participate in the process, and maps showing the districts used for district-level delegates. And states are also required to give adequate time and notice in advertising all of these steps in the process.
Thank you, Courtney. You know, as we come to our conclusion today, we want to just leave you with some main points in addition to what we hope is educating you on the delegate selection process. But there are some takeaways that we want to flag for you as you kind of think about how you want to engage in your state's delegate selection process. The first, and what is very important, is to connect with your state party. As you've heard Courtney and I say over and over again, each state has a unique process for selecting their delegates. So the state party is a good resource for you as you attempt to understand the nuance and the intricacies of how the process works in your state. Also, the specific requirements and the dates that are associated with your state's delegate selection process. We don't want you to miss any deadlines. We want you to know when all those deadlines occur. So the best place to start is with your state party. As Courtney and I often say, we interface with 57 state and territorial parties, and there are 57 different ways that delegates are elected. So that's why it's so important to reach out to your state party. The second point, review your state's delegate selection plan. Your state party will be able to let you know how to access their plan. They are typically on the state party websites, but the plan explains all of the steps for the election of delegates, standing committee members, pages, and that really will lead into the third point, which is making sure that you have a true understanding of how your state's process works. Your state party will be able to help you answer any of those questions. If you have any kind of inquiries around a specific step that is in the state party's plan that is specific to the state, reach out to them and use them as a resource. It is also an opportunity for state parties to grow those in your community that they are talking to. So it is a win-win situation. The fourth and point. These are all very important, but the fourth point is to work very closely with the presidential campaign. If you have already decided a candidate that you support, reach out to that campaign and express your interest in getting involved with the convention. It's a win-win situation because the candidates that, as they do better in the primaries, they are allocated more delegate positions. So that's more opportunities to elect people that support those candidates. It's important that the campaigns have the resources of all of the help that you can provide, and it is a good tool to get plugged into what's happening in your state. And then last but not least, organize your campaign. If you are interested in running for delegate, it is like a campaign. Notify your family and friends of your interests. Start campaigning to make sure that everyone knows that you are interested in running for delegate. It's important for the candidate of your choice to know, but it's also important for you to organize and run a campaign so that you can be successful to run for delegate.
Great. Thanks, Patrice. So I hope those takeaways are helpful, and I hope this training's been helpful. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. If you have any questions, please reach out to KJ, who works here with us at the DNC. He is the AAPI Engagement Director, and you can reach him by email at aapidems@dnc.org. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, you guys. And hopefully that was very useful for everyone here. I want to just wrap up by saying thank you all for being involved. Joining this conversation is the first step of many, and just getting your foot in the door and trying to get to the table and change the way we do our delegate process, change the faces we see there. So we hope to see you all in Philly in 2016. And if you're interested, please join us for our RNC webinar next week, November 3rd at 7 p.m. We hope to see more of you all there as well. So thank you.